Good morning, friends. Welcome to another live stream here at Empty Cloud Monastery during our winter retreat. Hello to Geeta, Denise, Kyle, to see you. And hello to Cows, our friend, as well. And where's Michael? Usually Michael always checks in. Is this the first morning of our Sutta study series that Michael is not present? Come on, Michael, you must be there. Well, hasn't said hello yet, but Kelly has. So good afternoon to Kelly as well. So I believe that Kelly is also in Europe since it's 8 a.m. here in this part of the United States anyway. All right, so Michael is not present or doesn't presently have access to the live chat. But hopefully we're all actually present. Pun intended. So today's our third day of the series that we're doing on the miracle of mindfulness that we've been talking about in the past 24 hours, and hopefully practicing as well as the Buddha has instructed. So I put in the live chat a link to a sutta that I wished to go through with all of you, that I feel is very pertinent, very important. So you can find it. If we can find the link, the translation from Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi there from Sutta Central. If you prefer Bhante Sujato's translation, you can also pick Bhante Sujato's translation. We have many options, such good karmic conditions. But before we go ahead, we can pay homage to our original teacher, the reason why we're here together in the first place. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham dhammam sangham namassami. So as usual, we will be reading the sutta first. As usual, as in whenever I share suttas, I like to read it first, so your mind is not somewhat kind of shifted by what I have to say, but you actually have a bit of a primer directly from the words of the Buddha, and you can have the opportunity to have your first reflections yourself. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling among the Sumbas, where there was a town of the Sumbas named Sedaka. There the Blessed One addressed the bhikkhus thus: Bhikkhus, once in the past an acrobat set up his bamboo pole and addressed his apprentice Medakatalika thus: Come, dear Medakatalika, climb the bamboo pole and stand on my shoulders. Having replied, Yes, teacher, the apprentice Medakatalika climbed up the bamboo pole and stood on the teacher's shoulders. The acrobat then said to the apprentice Medakatalika, You protect me, dear Medakatalika, and I'll protect you. Thus, guarded by one another, protected by one another, we'll display our skills, collect our fee, and get down safely from the bamboo pole. When this was said, the apprentice Medakatalika replied, That's not the way to do it, teacher. You protect yourself, teacher, and I'll protect myself. Thus, each self-guarded and self-protected will display our skills, collect our fee, and get down safely from the bamboo pole. That's the method here. That's the method there, the Blessed One said. It's just as the apprentice Medakatalika said to the teacher. I will protect myself, bhikkhus. Thus should be the establishments. Thus should the establishment of mindfulness be practiced. I will protect others, bhikkhus. Thus should the establishments of mindfulness be practiced. Protecting oneself because one protects others. Protecting others, one protects oneself. And how is it? Because that by protecting oneself, one protects others. By the pursuit, development, and cultivation of the four establishments of mindfulness. It is in such a way that by protecting oneself, one protects others. And how is it? Because that by protecting others, one protects oneself. By patience, harmlessness, loving kindness, and sympathy. It is in such a way that by protecting others, one protects oneself. So we can close our eyes and contemplate a few moments the words of the Buddha. Gently open your eyes again. And enjoy the Dhammasukha if that is what you're experiencing. I definitely am whenever I read this sutta, as well as many others. And yeah, I feel this is such an important sutta because, especially when it comes to the practice of mindfulness, we tend to, or actually just the practice of meditation, we tend to sometimes even feel a little bit guilty, as if like we should be doing something else in the world, as if this is kind of a practice that only benefits ourselves. Had many people, for example, over the years, coming on retreat and then stopping coming on retreat because they had families, and they felt a little bit guilty to go and practice and leave, quote unquote, their family behind. And on the flip side, then we actually had some other families where, even though one of the partners was not a practitioner, that actually was sending the one who was the practitioner on retreat. I was like, please go. I'll take care of the kids. I'll take care of the laundry. I'll take care of everything that needs to be taken care of. Please go, because you become actually a better person. Um, so please do it, because when you practice, we also see the benefits. And what an incredible partner that is. Not Buddhist, actually. And I'm thinking in particular, I'm not going to name names, but I'm thinking in particular at a couple that are friends of mine, where once again the husband of our friend has never even like attempted the practice of meditation, not interested at all, but so supportive towards his wife's practice and so encouraging. And because once again he's seen the incredible benefits that developing, that training the mind bring to the world. And so in this particular sutta, we see how there is the beautiful story, the metaphor of the acrobats that is brought together, brought to the forefront. And it's such an apt metaphor, as with all the metaphors really that are present in the Pali Canon. But in this particular situation, because it's so relatable, right? We have, even if we haven't, I've never actually attempted any acrobatic exercise by myself or by, actually, it's not true. I did when I was 7 years old, attempt some acrobatic, we were doing some acrobatic gyms wherever I was in school. And then I hurt myself really badly. So I was like, never doing this again. But I never did it with a companion. But whether we have done it, we've had that experience per se, it's besides the point, because we can actually have an intuitive understanding of both our sort of um, natural propensity of thinking, yes, of course, is something so dangerous as being doing these crazy exercise in the middle of the air, um, not only by myself, but like actually having someone else who is dependent on me when two acrobats are working together. There has to be anything that you do might affect them and vice versa. So it's beautiful how the teacher, kind of manifests, shares how we normally go about in the world of thinking, of having that sort of idea, that sense of sacrifice of, um, let me look after you and you look after myself. There's also a lot of disappointment sometimes that can be when um, we find that other people aren't taking care of us, and perhaps we spend so much time taking care of others. So there's that sense of expectation. There's so many different, scenarios that come to mind when we think about this sort of codependent relationship. And it's interesting how in the story, the metaphor of the acrobats, it's not the teacher giving a lesson to the apprentice, but it's the other way around. It's the apprentice that actually tells the teacher, no, 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 master. I take care of um, protecting myself, and you take care of protecting yourself. And in that way, we will be protecting one another, right? It's not it's not separate. And so it's interesting how we see, how is this related, to mindfulness. Of course, the an acrobatic performance requires an incredible development, actually, of mindfulness of the body, of awareness of this big chunk of meat and how it sort of plays out in the world. Any kind of little mistake can have dire consequences. So that's another reason why it is very, very important in this particular context, because it's something that, even though we might have the opposite approach, actually, when practicing, thinking that because actually most often than not in when practicing the four satipatthanas, for example, most often than not, we're not, doing an acrobatic performance where it's a sort of life or death situation. We actually can be quite complacent with what direction our mind can go or how our practice is going. But this sutta actually kind of gives us a bit of, or at least it gives to me, that sense of urgency, that sense of importance, that reminder that actually there is no difference. And that whenever we are hearing the Dhamma, we should be listening as if it were a matter of life or death, a matter of vital concern. And in the same way, we should be practicing as if it were a matter of vital concern. And I feel that one of the biggest, hindrances in us developing that quality of awareness, that quality of importance of training the mind, is the fact that there is that underlying delusion that we're doing it for ourselves, that it is something that we should be doing. Kind of like, oh, there's a big feast on the table, and you're like, well, so there's brownies, there's like a big chunk of pasta with whatever type of fatty sauce, and then there's like a pizza there, and then there's, I don't know, whatever foods you like, ice cream, and then there's salad, and you're like, well, I guess I should be eating salad, but how about I first stuff my bowl with the pizza and the other thing, and I'll take a little bit of salad because it's good for me. I'm supposed to be eating it. And then you eat the whole thing, and then there's no room for salad. Very human, actually. Very, very human. But you see, the reason why I'm bringing this up is to highlight the approach that sometimes we can take with meditation, with the training of the mind, which is okay. This is something that I'm supposed to be doing. All right, now there's like puja. I'll be doing an hour of meditation. Okay. Wait, what time is it? Have they rang the bell or not? I'm hungry. It's breakfast. Oh, yeah, I'll meditate better after breakfast. And then it's after breakfast, and you're like, oh, God, I'm so sleepy. I ate too much for breakfast. Okay, I'll meditate better this afternoon. And after the afternoon, it's after lunch. So, oh, God, I ate even more at lunch. So it becomes this chore rather than a practice. It's also like getting up in the morning to do meditation, or going to practice with other practitioners, even logging in like you did this morning. Like, okay, well, it's good for me to actually read the suttas or to study the suttas, or in the evening, it's good for me to be in touch during the pandemic and to do this half hour of meditation with other people across the world. Whatever it is, then it's once again this on our to-do list, on our uh, New Year's resolutions. But if we actually switch a little bit our minds and start understanding the importance of this practice, that actually, whenever we're practicing, whatever we're cultivating, is for the benefit of ourselves and for the benefit of others, then that starts having a different connotation, different power in the mind. I'll quote a different sutta actually from the Buddha, Anguttara Nikaya 7, 67, where the Buddha describes a noble disciple who is mindful, possessing supreme mindfulness and alertness, one who remembers and recollects what was done and said long ago. With mindfulness as his gatekeeper, the noble disciple abandons the unwholesome and develops the wholesome, abandons what is blameworthy and develops what is blameless, and maintains himself in purity. Another way that the Buddha describes the practice in Anguttara Nikaya 1076 is one who has a sense of moral shame and moral dread is heedful. One who is heedful is capable of abandoning disrespect, being difficult to speak to, and bad friendship. And so the reason why I selected these two particular extracts from these two suttas that I've been reading in the past month is because they highlight so much the connection with virtue that we've been, the development of virtue that we've been talking a bit yesterday about, and how important it is, of how developing mindfulness and developing then also actually what is usually translated as heedfulness, appamada, in Pali, so that uninterrupted mindfulness that permeates basically our existence, whether we're on the cushion or outside of the cushion. So constantly recollecting the Dhamma, constantly recollecting the teachings of the Buddha, and then developing the wisdom of knowing what is the appropriate response in every moment. Restraining our mind, understanding when we're about to get into a dangerous situation, like right before the meal. And going, oh, there will be all that delicious food on the table. It's going to be tempting. I'm going to start practicing all sorts of greed, hatred, and delusion, looking at the table, and then all sorts of greed, hatred, and delusion when sitting down and eating of the food. If I don't restrain the senses ahead of time, if I don't practice in accordance to Dhamma ahead of time, if I am not aware of what is going on, if I just go about it very cluelessly, right? So as we recollect in this way, in every single thing that we do about the day, and we start developing a wisdom that leads us towards nourishing the wholesome qualities that we have, building new wholesome qualities from scratch that we didn't even know existed in the world, let alone that were possible for us to manifest. And we start drying out the unwholesome qualities that are present in the mind and creating an unfertile ground for other unwholesome qualities to germinate. And in this way, then we are also purifying all our actions through body, speech, and mind when interacting with others. Because we're cultivating, as the Buddha says in the last sutta that the last quote of the sutta that I shared, basically developing hiriyottapa, always bringing it to the forefront of the mind. I seem to understand that in American culture, there's a bit of a sort of, people don't like the words shame and dread. They have a big, or in English, maybe perhaps English speakers. So English is not my first language. So when I heard dread and shame, I was like, all right. But whenever I'm surrounded by native speakers, they're all like, shame and dread. So actually here at Empty Cloud, we have every so often these debates on like how to translate properly, accurately, dread and shame. And I'm actually how to accurately translate hiriyottapa. And I am the only one actually so far who's a big fan of shame and dread, as Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi has translated them. Because actually I feel it's very important to use strong wordings. And that even though we might have some negative associations perhaps with our Christian upbringing, I seem to understand that in Protestantism there's a big emphasis on you got to be ashamed of things or whatever. In Catholicism, we have more an emphasis on guilt. So maybe that's why I was like, oh, okay, shame. Yeah, sure. My mom used to always say that, by the way. Should be ashamed of yourself. And I was like, okay. So doesn't really upset me. But what actually I have found extremely beneficial in my practice, and why I actually like these words, was, for example, the practice of not killing. Before Buddhism, I was pretty good with humans. I never killed human beings that I could see, and intentionally or unintentionally. So I was doing all right on that camp. I also didn't kill. I was pretty good on not killing big animals, cats or whatever. I thought that was pretty wrong. I was not necessarily opposed to others killing, say, livestock for food. I remember that was kind of like, it's unfortunate, but there is that sort of inevitability. Someone's got to eat. And then it went all the way to insects, where I actually thought the right thing to do is to exterminate all insects. And in fact, if someone were not to kill an insect was present, especially if the insect was quite gross to my perception, for example, a cockroach, they had to be killed. Let's not even get to mosquitoes. I don't even know. I think I've exterminated, done genocides of mosquitoes in this current life. Can't even imagine the countless lives before that. So when I came to Buddhist practice and I took at the very beginning, the 5 precepts, And I've shared that story over and over again. But we used to have an ant infestation at the Rockaway Summer House, our previous center. And so it was every single day. They even when you were showering, it was quite impressive. Like anything that had something a remote like sweet undertaste, hordes of ants would go and collect on everything. Didn't matter how clean the kitchen was and how secure things were, they would find a way into, even if we didn't have sugar, they would find something that was remotely vaguely sweet. Most bizarre things. So every day we had to practice, you know, very carefully, not harming all these ants and removing them out. And at the very beginning, I was so frustrated, not really fully understanding and getting actually so angry at this stupid precept of not killing when we could have just called someone to exterminate all these living beings, making my life infernal. And then after practicing this way over and over again, then my mind started switching to the point where I call them Ajahn ants because they taught me compassion. At a certain point, I remember seeing this ant in the sink and there was some water running down. And my first impulse was to take the ant and bring her to safety. And then I caught my mind going like, wow, this wholesome quality of compassion towards this sentient being, towards this insect that I normally find irritating, was not there before. And now it is. And it feels so much better than when I was having all those afflicted states beforehand. And as as I kept on practicing in this way, now it's unimaginable for me to kill a sentient being on purpose. There is dread, like how dreadful to kill an ant. And that sort of, if I were to do something like that, that would be shameful, but not in a way of like, oh, horrible me, but rather like, oh, that's something that I could never do. And that's when it's wholesome. It's a good quality that is nourished. It's a quality that brings towards the cessation of suffering, which is why I like these words anyway. So yeah, develop shame and dread. And I actually think that's probably what was the original sort of purpose also in Christianity. It's just that a lot of teachings get distorted through the times. And they start acquiring different meanings or they are executed in a different way. You see that also in Asia with the concept of karma. The concept of karma is an extremely liberating teaching when one understands cause and consequence, but sometimes it's distorted and actually used to oppress people. So there's always a slippery slope with a lot of fine line when something wholesome can become unwholesome. And then loses its meaning altogether. I was also made aware that in some countries, Buddhist countries, or actually in one Buddhist country in particular, when we were having a conversation here on Hiriotapa, I was told that due to political events in the past decades, now Hiriotapa is used as a way to shame women in dressing in a particular way, or not, that they're not good enough or whatever it is when they are in Buddhist circles. And that is once again an inappropriate, a distorted way of approaching these teachings. But anyway, the whole point is that when we start practicing this way, as I shared, for example, with the ant, then this is of benefit for myself and for the ant. So for other sentient beings, but also all sentient beings at large. Because, of course, if now I'm not capable of killing an ant, even more so, how bizarre would it be to, like, how unthinkable it would be to kill a human? And even though that was not present in my mind several years ago when I started, even though I was not killing sentient beings, what we don't understand is that whatever we're cultivating in with body, speech, and mind is creating conditions for other actions through body, speech, and mind to happen in the future. So if we are killing constantly, doesn't matter if we're not killing right now humans, but we're constantly killing insects, we're cultivating a mind of hatred, of aversion, of irritability. We're cultivating disregard for life. We're cultivating disregard for the happiness of others, a callousness, an indifference for pain, for suffering of others. We're nourishing self-centeredness, selfishness, and we are creating a whole huge, big, massive suffering. Another really evident thing that happened to me with Buddhist practice was that I stopped being depressed, severely depressed every year. And in hindsight, when I think about my life before practicing in accordance to the Buddhist teachings, it's not that there was anything, sort of major that I was doing, but there were all these, like, quote unquote major things in Buddhist practice, not following the 5 precepts, that then create a mind that is depressed, create a mind that is not luminous. So I think that definitely, just practicing the first precept removed a lot of the coarse hatred of the mind that was making it so unbearable to be. We have to spend all the time with our mind. Better be a nice place, nice clean place, instead of this this intense, sort of unwholesome state of being. And so we see how the Buddha says, how is it that by protecting others, one protects oneself by patience, harmlessness, loving kindness, and sympathy? Yay! Yeah, absolutely. Comfortable place for us to be in our mind, as we're saying, and also comfortable place for others to be, to relate it. And of course, that's a gradual practice. It doesn't happen naturally. I can still be pretty unpleasant for others and for myself, but definitely much better than a few years ago. This is another remarkable thing of actually of practitioners, is how rapidly people change. There is one thing, we tend to have this assumption that people are kind of like always the same of how we remember them to be. And there is a bit of a truth to that when someone is not practicing, not because there is a predestination, but rather because there is no training of the mind. Hence, one tends to repeat the same mistake over and over again. And there is a sense of continuity that then leads to a very predictable result. But when one starts going against the stream, and it's against the stream of the world, but also against the stream, first and foremost, of our natural tendencies, of our instinctive way of going about the world, then bam, the progress is really rapid. It's fast, it's quick, which then gives us confidence in the path, gives us a real appreciation for these teachings and motivation to go further because it is powerful. But we also see in this sutta, getting back to the sutta, how another thing that speaks to me is how we really see Um, throughout the history of Buddhism, there's like lots of weird things that come up, like Hinayana and Mahayana. So Hinayana, the lesser vehicle, where we're all like just sometimes, unfortunately, Hinayana becomes another way to talk about the Theravada tradition, and Mahayana being the higher vehicle because one is practicing not only for their own sake but for the sake of others. But when we're actually looking at the teachings, then one really understands that there is no difference. Doesn't matter any kind of label or any kind of school that we're following. If we're actually practicing in accordance to the Buddhist teachings, it always has to be for the benefit of ourselves and others. There is no difference. And that's also when we realize fully non-self. Stop getting so obsessed with I am the one who needs to remove all this stuff. I am the one who has to do the path. I'm the one who attains enlightenment. But understand truly how things are. So very important. This is another way to motivate ourselves, as to get back to what we're saying earlier, that if we get into this kind of I need to eat a salad and I need to do a bunch of meditation every day because it's good for me. Instead, we can switch our mind state and go, let me practice. Let me do a bit of meditation this morning so I'll be more pleasant with my coworkers, for example, or be more pleasant with my family. I'll be more pleasant with myself too. I'll actually have a nice time this morning. I will be okay. I won't dread having to spend the entire weekend by myself during a pandemic. It will actually be a nice, comfortable, living room in my mind where I won't have to get distracted with all sorts of rubbish TV or rubbish junk food or whatever it is, because actually I'll be having I'll go like, oh, it's quite nice. I can just like be here with myself. So this is, I think, all that comes to mind, but please feel free to ask any questions or make any comments in the live chat, and we'll take it from there. All right, and we have a few friends that have joined us in the meanwhile. Hello to Elaine, Cittapala, Giovanna, Edward, Geeta, good to see you. And hello to Suzanne as well. Long time no see, Suzanne. And Geeta says, Ayya, Ajahn Brahm, when in meditation, did not harm the mosquitoes that were biting him. And in fact, he got very ill. He mentioned that Ajahn Chah had come to visit him at the hospital. This lifted up his spirit. He also said once you get into a deep state of meditation, you no longer notice the mosquitoes. At home, we try and catch the bugs and spiders and set them free outside. Oh, well done. Well done for caring for sentient beings. Yes, Ajahn Brahm has many amusing stories on Ajahn mosquitoes. So actually, I had a bit of a experience of that when I went to Thailand myself. Of when I think I actually shared this during this winter retreat when I did the live streams. But anyway, I remember when I went, I was at this beautiful monastery, and after puja, since it was still dark, and there was some time after the whatever we had to do, I remember going, oh, now I'm going to go by the lake. There's this beautiful lake with this beautiful Bodhi tree. It's like, now I'm going to go and sit down the Bodhi tree just like the Buddha and get enlightened here in this beautiful lake. Just like Puta, this is such a perfect setting. It was very Bernardo Bertolucci, like the movie. It's like I'm gonna be the female version. I'm gonna go. Yes, this is so great. Because actually the setup was very Bernardo Bertolucci. Everything was great. I used to be very much into um, art and visuals. So that's my delusion. So very kind of bimbo of me in in Thailand. And I sit down and I'm very upright position under the Bodhi tree. And the first 5 minutes were actually quite blissful. I remember, oh yes, this is so great. Mhm, mhm. And then I feel the first little mosquito creeping in, and I send them metta. Then the second one that probably heard from the first one, and the third, and then the fourth, and then after like literally like 60 seconds, my entire body is submerged with mosquitoes. And I actually recollected the story of Ajahn Brahm. So I was like, yes, yes. They're teaching me just like the ants, and they were teaching me now. I love them all. And then it was unbearable. And I lost all my equanimity in a second. And my body was covered, literally covered from head to toes in bubbles, like the spots. I was having basically kind of like a anaphylactic shock almost. Not quite, but if I had stayed there, had I like kept on braving it, I would have probably had some sort of was getting to that point. And the reason why I'm sharing this unflattering story is that we also need to be realistic with ourselves and give us the time to, it is a gradual practice. So we can read lots of inspiring things, and they're true, but it's not that Ajahn Brahm developed all the qualities that he has developed overnight. So sometimes we have to be gentle with ourselves and go, okay, maybe maybe having an allergic reaction under the Bodhi tree in this monastery in the middle of nowhere in Thailand is really not a good idea. Let me build up to this. And yeah, of course. Actually, he got very ill. I don't remember that story of him getting very ill, but yes, that's like a very common story of pretty much any monastic, especially because mosquitoes, we tend to think of the deadliest animal being like a lion or like big cats or whatever, but actually the mosquito apparently is the deadliest animal on earth. So you can catch all sorts of like horrible mortal diseases, and especially if you are a foreigner to a particular country and you haven't developed sort of right constitution to brave with a lot of different things that are present, and people who are born there are just have antibodies, I guess it's called, to a lot of different things. Like me, even without getting to mosquitoes, the water. I remember the first time I went to India, the majority of the Indian people were just drinking water out of the faucet. If you had any non-Indian person drink like even a drop, bam, like they would have an incredible heart reaction. And that really made an impact in my mind of realizing how sometimes actually was the fact that I was raised in such a purified quote unquote world that then my body was so fragile that I couldn't really like bear with a few germs in the water, so to speak. So anyway, this point being is that we have to be realistic with the conditions that our body has. But yeah, so there are many amusing stories of Ajahn Chah. I don't remember if, I think it was actually Ajahn Pasano rather than Ajahn Brahm, but maybe he had the same reaction. So Ajahn Pasano, who is Mate Sudaso's preceptor, at a certain point had fallen really ill and was at the hospital and was about to die. And so they called Ajahn Chah, who visited him at the hospital, and he was so happy to see his teacher. Like, oh yes, thank you for coming here. And Ajahn Chah looked at him and was like, well, either you'll get better or you won't, and then left. And as I'm I was like, whoa. And it's actually such a great teaching on so many ways. Also to somewhat dismantle our idealistic sort of stories that we have of spiritual teachers, of what a spiritual teacher or an enlightened being is supposed to say or act or do, which is basically not really. We're not expecting them to act as enlightened beings most often than not, but rather as people who are pleasing to us, so that they say something that makes us feel better. That is not necessarily the truth. It's not necessarily like giving us any insight in reality, but rather just kind of like a sort of comfort, um, comfort here and there. We have lots of expectations. I realized in my mind, actually, at a certain point, especially when I was actually also traveling in Thailand, but even before that, with all different monastics running this organization, at a certain point, I was like, what do I think an enlightened being looks like? And what do I think an enlightened being behaves or says? And where are these preconceived ideas coming from? Are they actually a reflection of the Dhamma, or are they a reflection of my storytelling, my Bernardo Bertolucci movie in the mind, like no different than the sort of silly story that I had created in my mind, that as soon as I would have sat down on the beautiful location and setup of the Bodhi tree, then I would have attained awakening, right? Sometimes it's the same kind of thing, that we're not really looking for the absence of greed, hatred, and delusion, but we're just looking for comfort. No different than when we have problems in life and then we contact such and such people that we subconsciously know are going to say the thing that we like, right? So we're kind of like, okay, let me call this. Okay, great. Oh, now I feel better. We don't really feel better, but we just have our sort of delusions confirmed. And so that it's reassuring. But anyway, I went on a tangent there. Now I don't remember anymore. Oh, Ajahn Chah. So really understanding that he was fundamentally highlighting the nature of things, which is true. Either we get better, or we don't. And it's okay. Otherwise, it's just how things are, and we need to accept them. So in that way, when we actually really truly understand these words, then they are of incredible comfort. If we truly understand, if we just go, okay, it's just like this. It is what it is, and I'm not going to make a problem out of it, then that is of incredible comfort, because actually we are creating our own comfort. We're not trying to get some sort of artificial placebo from outside. And I congratulate you, Gita, for your practice of virtue. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And hello, Ramos. Good to see you. Oh, says, may all sentient beings witness this profound, brilliant glory. Sadhu. And Denise says, I'll trade the ants at the Rockaway House for this pandemic any day. In hindsight, ants were not so bad. I miss meditating with a group. Ah, yes. Well, as the weather gets better, which these days doesn't seem quite like it since it's snowing every day almost. But everything is impermanent. The snow is too. So is rain and freezing cold and all such things. So in a few months, probably actually I would say as soon as April, we're going to start doing outdoor things again. So you're welcome to join us here at Empty Cloud, together but separate. I mean, with social distance. And Suzanne says, that was a really insightful tangent. I became aware recently about how how I approach certain people in certain ways in the hope of a certain response. Yes, only recently. That's great. Yes, that's when we start having insights on how our mind works, and without shame, like without being, oh, I'm such a like a bad person, bad practitioner. I'm looking to feel in this way, because we can get all caught up in all of these stories of being in a particular way. Um, but rather just being okay, with, oh, for example, I like to be liked. Hmm. Do the other people here at the monastery like to be liked? Yeah. Does anyone here like to be disliked? Anyone here present? No, nobody's raising the hand, right? So it's actually like a sort of very human common thing. So we need to catch ourselves whenever, say, we're trying to do something that is pleasing, or we are doing something that wants that sort of feedback, because we start then noticing how sometimes we make unwholesome choices, not because we even want to make that unwholesome choice, but rather because we know X, Y, and Z person around us will appreciate, will like me if I make that unwholesome choice, right? I'll fit better in the group of people that I'm around. I'll be accepted. And if we start getting into that, if we have a glimpse of it, and then we start getting into our self-bashing mode, then we'll just ignore it. We'll turn away from it and not doing anything about it. But if we acknowledge it, see it, and go, okay, this is what's going on. This is no different than pretty much every human being who's not awakened. Then you can laugh about it. It doesn't become a problem. Rather, it becomes just a product of causes and conditions, right? You're like, okay, well, of course, I've developed all these eons. The tendency of wanting to be liked and not wanting to be disliked, the tendency of being obsessed about what people think about me, and what is my sort of placement in the social hierarchy. But I don't need to be bothered with that anymore. I can see these thoughts appearing in the mind, see the tendency of wanting to grasp at them, and then practice self-restraint. Throw them out. Let them do their course. Appear and disappear. It's only dukkha arising and only dukkha ceasing. Only suffering arising and only suffering ceasing. And then it's not a problem anymore. So it's great. And we can actually rejoice in these insights that we have in our mind. Insights of understanding the patterns, how we go about the world. So yeah, I mean, honestly, everything has been recent for me as well too. I don't know exactly in time when I started noticing noticing this, but this is actually what is extremely beneficial in terms of Dharma practice. That we create, once again, the conditions to really see, to catch ourselves, instead of going all oblivious about in the world and going like, oh yeah, well, actually, I'm so right. When I've had these conflicts with such and such person, all the people I spoke to, they all said that I was right. So I'm clearly right. So we can create all these narratives, right? But it's not necessarily that all the people you spoke with said you're right. It's just that you picked them because you knew they were going to tell you were right. There is a good friend of mine, Samantha, that is an incredible, she's a friend of mine from my previous life within this life. And she's a very loving person, very loyal friend. So I know that, I mean, unless I actually like kill a human being tomorrow, anything I tell her, if I have a disagreement with someone, she's going to be on my side. And so I noticed it's been very interesting throughout the years. I've like started noticing this, that when I want to be right, I tend to gravitate towards talking to Samantha because she makes me feel really good about myself. And if I start talking about, all the say unwholesome behaviors that I've done, she will go like, yeah, they totally deserved it. And I'm like, yes, yes. That's right. She's also Italian, so she understands, fiery temperament. So she's not judgmental. But then, if I tell a few things, if I actually pick Bante Sudasan, he might be have a bit of a different outlook. So yeah, it's okay. It's just part of being humans. So, all right. I don't see anything else popping up in the live chat. So maybe that's all for this morning. And we'll be meeting again this evening to talk a little bit more about the miracle of mindfulness that we're starting to realize that perhaps has, a lot of different shades and a lot of different consequences that are wholesome. Both for ourselves and other sentient beings that have to deal with us on a regular basis, whether we or they like it or not. Like all the sentient beings here at the monastery, whether human and non-humans, they all have to deal with me one way or the other. So may my practice benefit myself and them too. So they have to deal less and less with my defilements and more with good wholesome qualities. All right, so we can end the morning with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May you swiftly attain awakening.